than Anthony Treash of Pro Football Focus to help us crunch the numbers. Anthony, appreciate you taking the time, man. What's going on?
Yeah, well, bear with me. I am battling a little bit with some season allergies, so I sound a little off, but I'm ready to rock, man. I'm excited to talk some Gamecocks football after a big, big weekend.
Indeed. Hey, it's like you said, man, 'tis the season. Also, by the way, Anthony, I want to shout you out because I was thinking of you this morning when I was picking out my hat for the show today. I was like, which hat will most impress our good friend Anthony Treash? So I went with the vintage throwback lid. So I hope I still have your approval here.
100%. Those are my favorite. I love this style.
Even got the green bill, man. That's how you know it's a real throwback. That's how you know
that predates me. So I mean, yeah. I'm a big fan of it. Big fan of it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Anthony, let's go ahead and dive into it, man. Obviously, good vibes all around for South Carolina. I've been joking with people that I've been able to take the cigar out of my mouth just long enough to be able to do the segments this week, and why not? You know, a fantastic day, a fantastic night, I should say, at Williams-Brice Stadium. Gamecocks get the big 30-24 win, and it's so funny, Anthony. I feel like we sat here a week ago talking about special teams and Beamer ball. You know, you wonder how long you can rely on those things, and we thought maybe going in this A&M game, right, there were obviously reasons to feel really good, but it's just one of those things you never know, right? Well, we didn't have to wait long. First play of the game, South Carolina takes it back, 100-yard kickoff return by Xavier Legette. How impressed were you, and how impressed are you that yet again, week after week after week, it's almost becoming one of those things where you can depend on South Carolina making a big special teams play?
I mean, it was shocking. I mean, just the fact that he was able to stay upright throughout that entire thing and take it to the house. I mean, it was a dream start for South Carolina. And again, it goes into a lot of things. And, you know, I mentioned last week about how, I think it was last week, talking about, you know, special teams factor. And a lot of it is coaching, I think, more than anything. Player talent goes into it, but coaching. But I think we saw right there player talent kind of shine and carry the way there because – I mean, he should have been on the ground 3 or 4 different times there. So, I mean, it was pretty remarkable. I kind of had the same reaction like everybody else. I saw a quote from Seven, I think he put out there, just the, you know, his feeling on it. I mean, it was kind of the same way. It was just, you know, I mean, this is everything they kind of needed. And a few plays later, it just kept going. And, you know, it's not just a fact of luck. It's a, you know, fact of skill and talent. So, I mean, again, that's something that you want to see down there in South Carolina. And it's just speaks volumes about the way the program's kind of shifting.
Now let's move into 7, Anthony. Obviously, you know, every single week, I always value getting your insight on Spencer Rattler. And you look at the numbers, 12 of 25, 168 yards, no touchdowns, no picks, though, took care of the football, 55.4 QBR. Am I crazy, though, for feeling much more optimistic watching his performance Saturday night and moving throughout the rest of the season? Because I feel like he was really close. If not for a couple of drops, I think it's a much different narrative coming in this week. Had a couple of those deep balls again dropped. The one by Jalen Brooks is the one that stands out. What did you see from Spencer Rattler? Again, I feel like there were a couple of plays on Saturday night where you really look, that was as comfortable as I thought he's looked all season long. And there were a couple of throws he made, Anthony, where I looked at it and said, this is why you wanted him so badly. He put the ball in a position that I feel like only a handful of guys in college football can do so. What did you take away from his performance? And am I crazy for feeling like maybe his breakout performance this season is just around the corner after some encouraging signs we saw against A&M?
Yeah, you know, so I couldn't watch this game live after those first few series. And, you know, after going back, I saw the box score and I was like, man, didn't probably have his best day. And then I went back and watched and I said, nope, this was by far the best performance of the season. It just doesn't – the box score doesn't show that. And you look at the PFF grades and it reflects that. He had his highest PFF grade of the season. You know, that's why you should never scout the box score. Go back and watch, look at the advanced stuff, and you'll see he played pretty damn good football. And I thought that was probably the game where, you know, we kept talking about, you know, he needs to play his own game, right? Let him play his own game. Don't force him to play something he doesn't want to play. And he played his own game, I thought. You know, he did have, you know, 2 incredible throws that fell incomplete. The one at the end of the first half, I mean, that would have been kind of the nail in the coffin, I think. Probably would have made this thing a little bit more lopsided. I mean, a hell of a throw. Just some of the stuff that he was able to do kind of outside of the structure of the offense. He had a couple of huge throws that were kind of like, okay, this is the Rattler that we know, right? This is the Rattler that we came accustomed to when he was at Oklahoma, and you kind of saw a little bit in this game. So, I mean, it's something to be encouraged about, right? I mean, just because, I thought the Kentucky game was a big, big opportunity for him. And, as we talked about, it really wasn't so much him. This game was kind of like, okay, you need to show something right now, right? And he did show it. And there's reason to believe, over the next few games, which, I mean, you could say are probably some of the biggest games that, Shane Beamer could have this early on. Because, I mean, if you can kind of get off to, keep adding to the streak, I mean, you're going to have some more eyeballs on you, and you're going to get a lot of recruits' interest. Just overall player morale is going to be better, and South Carolina deserves it and needs it. So I thought it was overall an encouraging aspect, but the biggest thing was that he played his own game, I thought, right? I mean, he did when the plays started to break down, right? He wasn't contained to inside because, like I said, I could be wrong here, but it definitely seemed like that had been a big point in the coach's room. Like, hey, you got to stop running outside the pocket, kind of forcing this stuff. You're making things more difficult. Just stay calm, stay composed, be a pocket passer. But, he's a guy that thrives when he's on the move, right? That's where he really does excel. And I thought for the first time we saw him kind of do that. I don't have the exact numbers, but I do know for a fact that, you look at some of his outside of structure attempts. So when I say outside of the structure of the offense, this is, you're supposed to be a straight drop back, right? But then all of a sudden the play boils down, the pocket gets muddy, and you're forced out. He had, I think, 5 or 6 of those dropbacks in this game when he had about 5 or 6 the entire season up until this point. And that's where you saw a few of those big throws there. So, overall, it was a very, very encouraging night. It showed to me that, hey, he's not broken, right? He's still got it in him, and he can be a high-level quarterback. And now it's just about piecing it together in the next few games.
Anthony, you lead into a point that I wanted to make while you were talking, but you hit the nail on the head, man. I feel like Spencer Rattler is at his best when he's improvising almost. Like when he's on the move, like you mentioned, and you obviously don't want him running for his life, and we've been talking about him not being so skittish and not, running from the rush when it's not there, but it does feel like when he's rolling out of the pocket, I just feel like that's when he's making like the biggest plays. That's when those big plays come, is when he's getting outside of the pocket, stretching the play out, finding his receivers downfield. I mean, again, you don't want him to have to improvise on a consistent basis, but I don't know. When I think of Spencer Rattler's game, I kind of think of this quarterback kind of playing backyard football, just making it up as he goes along, and typically it works out for him.
Exactly. And you're going to have some lows that come with that too. It's just a volatile play style. And, maybe he's never going to be that quarterback that is just perfect in making that decision of, this is when to, kind of improvise and make a play on your own, or, this is just kind of taking what the defense gives them. Just basically, I mean, even in this game, I mean, if I had to kind of pick apart what I did see from him, just needs to get the ball out quicker. I mean, there's some plays where you can kind of, see it develop and you're like, okay, you can throw it now, but then it's just, 4/10 of a second later, you're just kind of staring at it, trying to get a bigger window. And, when you play some of the, the premier competition, and if you want to talk about it from an NFL perspective, like you can't live with that method, right? Because that's how, you're not going to see defenders and they can make some plays on the ball, especially at the NFL level, just significantly higher level players, both mentally and physically, that can take advantage of that play style. But in college, I think when you're like that, you kind of have to let them do their improvising, and just let him kind of go with that method. But again, that's when it comes with the highs and the lows. And that was a problem in Oklahoma, right? Because you had all those high level moments, but you still had some of those moments that people like to really pick apart. And again, it kind of goes back to the bigger picture of just people just like to pick on him, right? Just because of everything that he has been, highly regarded recruit, the documentary and all of that stuff. So they wanted to pick apart those low moments without focusing on the high. And I think when he got to South Carolina, could be completely wrong, but I do think that it was a point to say, hey, we need to make you a different quarterback so you get rid of those low moments. And it was a little bit too safe and conservative, and that's why we were seeing, I would say, our expectations not met. But again, I think this A&M game, it was a different story where it was kind of, the true Spencer Rattler showing, and we just really didn't see any, I would say, flat out bad decisions from him. There were that one, of course, the strip stack was an issue. But overall, it was just, I mean, it was a Spencer Rattler game that, I would have thought I was watching him in Oklahoma. I mean, it was very reminiscent of that. And again, the box score would have looked significantly better if he would have saw a couple of those big time throws fall complete like they should have.
Yeah, Anthony, like I said, now we're going to move off of Rattler because there's a lot of other facets of this football team I want to get to. But I have this feeling. I don't know if it's going to come this weekend. I don't know if it's going to be Vandy or Florida or what game it's going to be. But I do feel like there's going to be a breakout game for Spencer Rattler. It's just hard for me to believe that he's going to go throughout this entire season and not have one game in which he will say goes over 300. Like I just got to think there's one game where it's all going to click. And like I said, that's what I look at when I look back at that game on Saturday night moving forward is I'm more hopeful and optimistic, I think, than I've been at any point this season that game, like I mentioned, in the beginning, is just around the corner. And that's obviously the hope. Because as much fun as it is winning right now, you still feel like obviously offensively there's a lot more in the tank that you're not seeing right now because he hasn't quite had that. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
For sure.
But, yeah. Now, obviously Saturday night, Anthony, Marshawn Lloyd, 18 carries, 92 yards, 5.1 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns. I mean, he just continues to be a touchdown machine for South Carolina. What you saw from him, again, I don't know why, but it took a little while for the Gamecocks to actually get him the football. I think he only had 3 or 4 carries in that first half. But another impressive night from Lloyd, and he is very quickly establishing himself as one of the top ball carriers in the SEC.
Yeah, for sure. And I think kind of having him take that step forward, because honestly, what we saw from him last year, it wasn't all that encouraging, right? I know a lot of people thought, okay, let's look at Christian Beal-Smith, transfer from Wake, maybe he can be the Kenneth Walker, and I think that was very lofty expectations. And I thought if they're going to have a path to rushing success, it's going to be through just fast improvement from Marshawn Lloyd, who was, I mean, again, it was very discouraging at first, but you got to remember, young, inexperienced player, more reps, more opportunity, you're going to see that improvement. That's typically what you see in the collegiate ranks, and we're seeing it this year. And I think, again, I think kind of leaning on him, and I hope throughout the next, the last month or so of the season, we kind of see him take on more of that marquee role. He's getting far more work than any other player. I think that's really what you kind of need in that backfield. But I think the big thing with him is just you kind of see in those clutch moments, right? And I don't think it's something with him where it's so consistent, but he comes out when you need him to, right? He gives you that big run when you need it. A couple of breakaway runs of 15 plus yards for the game. That's honestly my big takeaway there is that he's somebody that you can count and lean on, which I think South Carolina had been missing.
Now you look at the receivers. I want to talk about them, Anthony. Not a lot of conversation this week. The guy I want to focus on, though, Austin Stogner, 3 catches for 46 yards. We've been waiting on him to do something, and he appeared to be one of, if not Spencer Rattler's favorite target. Had a really nice contested catch, back shoulder on the sideline. What you saw from him, and again, I think this is a guy we've sort of been waiting on that South or that Oklahoma connection, if you will, in Columbia. And that could be something that obviously helps him down the stretch because I know Stogner's a guy that you guys are really high on as well.
Yeah, he was a player where, we came into the season and we're like, look, if he can kind of get back to form, he's going to be one of the best. But can he? That was a big if just because of what he kind of battled there with the injury, the staph infection. Ever since then, he just really hadn't been himself that we saw kind of back in 2020 before that injury occurred. But I think we're starting to kind of see that come to light a little bit. And I think being in an offense too, which that was my biggest takeaway from the receiving unit as a whole, is that, entering the year, I looked at this group and we talked about it, is that, there may not be that number one guy. With Juice Wells, I thought would be that number one guy, and I think he is. But, I thought this was more of a well-rounded group that was very complimentary of each other. And I think we saw that in this game, just with the, overall share. But this was the one where we saw, okay, Austin Stogner looked a little bit like his old form there, like you said, with that nice contested catch. But overall, I think this is something, really for the offense as a whole, this was a performance where it's like, okay, I don't know if it wasn't perfect, but you at least saw a little bit of something from everyone to be encouraged about, okay, maybe they're on the right track to piecing this together for, the biggest game of the year at the end of the season, right? So I think that's kind of the big takeaway there. We at least saw something. We saw some flashes of Austin Stogner that we saw when he was back in Norman that we hadn't seen previously. So that's overall something to be encouraged about.
Anthony, let's move to the defensive side of the football because I really thought the Gamecocks defense were the unsung heroes in that game. While the offense was sort of sputtering and figuring themselves out and getting in gear, that defense really stood tall, especially I think back to the third quarter, but all throughout that football game. But it's like you mentioned earlier, you can't just judge a game and the performances off the box score, because you would look, oh, they generated no sacks. They obviously weren't in the backfield. 9 quarterback hurries, and they were hitting Haynes King all night long. Just talk about that South Carolina defense and specifically what the numbers say about the Gamecocks and their pressures on Saturday night.
Yeah, and taking advantage of the quarterback's mistakes, right? Because that was something we talked about. I mean, Texas A&M, they just don't have a quarterback, and Haynes King made some pivotal mistakes early on, and just the offense overall made some pivotal mistakes, and South Carolina capitalized on it, right? I mean, getting out 17 outs, start the game first few minutes, and having a pick and a fumble. I mean, that's hard to do, hard to take advantage of. So I think that was kind of the big thing there, is that, overall, I mean, that those first 5 minutes or so was the building block, obviously, to win the football game. But like you talked about it, the pressures, and pull up the exact number for overall for the game. But I mean, that was a big takeaway. You never want to look at the sacks overall. They had 33 pressures as a whole for the game, which is extraordinarily high. Pressure speaks more volumes, I think, because it kind of looks at it as, okay, especially in college. And I can't remember if we've talked about this. I've talked about this a few times. It's probably like something I'm most passionate about, is just like how important the pass rush is in college football. It's far more valuable than it is at the NFL level. Whereas I think probably having a more sturdy back end is more important. But in college, especially at the Power 5 level, having that impactful pass rush is key, because these are young quarterbacks, right? None of these quarterbacks could step foot. I don't care if you're playing Ohio State or Bama even. None of these quarterbacks can step foot on an NFL field and hold their own week one. All of these quarterbacks have some types of issue, especially Texas A&M. If things kind of start to break down, they make some pretty big mistakes there, right? And if they're not in rhythm, that's when panic starts to occur there. So getting to the quarterback is key there. And so while you see a goose egg in the sack column, you see 33 pressures. I mean, this was a team effort. This was collective, right? I mean, it speaks volumes. And that goes hand in hand, too, when you look at the defensive backs, too. Because I think a lot of people, you look at Cam Smith, you look at Darius Rush, they both had great games. I mean, obviously, Cam Smith, a couple penalties there, but, overall, they collectively allowed just 5 receiving yards outside of the penalties, which is, I mean, that's what you want from your corners, right? Especially Darius Rush. I mean, made PFF Team of the Week. He was definitely one of the best defensive players overall of all of Week 8, regardless of position there. So, I mean, it was definitely a collective effort. And I think you look at the pass rush, and then again, 33 pressures. That says a lot there. So I would rather have 33 pressures, no sacks, than 2 sacks and 4 pressures, right? I mean, I think that's probably the big takeaway there.
Anthony, let's stick with Darius Rush, because you guys actually tweeted this from the PFF College account. Again, that's at PFF_college. You guys be sure to go follow that. Darius Rush in coverage against Texas A&M, 39 coverage snaps, 5 yards allowed, 1 interception, 1 pass breakup, and an 86.4 coverage grade. Cam Smith in that secondary, he gets most of the love and the hype and the hoopla. But Darius Rush, what a night from him against Texas A&M. Again, just talk about his big game against the Aggies.
Yeah, and I think, even after last year when Cam Smith, like a year ago, people still didn't know who Cam Smith was, even though he was performing at an extraordinarily high level. And I think over the offseason, obviously his hype built, but I mean, Darius Rush was kind of kicked to the curb there. He still was pretty good last year for the Gamecocks, and a lot of people just didn't even consider him. And really, I think we talked about it, maybe the first couple of times I was on here in the offseason, but I mean, this was definitely one of the better cornerback duos in the SEC and really in college football coming into the season. People just didn't know who Darius Rush, was. And he's been playing good so far this season. And I think this game, people now know who Darius Rush is, right? He's the guy that took advantage of Texas A&M, right? He was a key reason there, obviously. 5 yards allowed, like you said, a pick. I would say definitely probably I wouldn't even say maybe. I think it was the best game of his career, just overall what he's seen. I mean, again, the pick came in clutch. So I think overall, this quarterback duo finally is, I think, getting a little bit more love than they should. And I think you look over the next few weeks, I mean, there's no premier quarterback I think they're really facing. And I think there's reason to be encouraged and excited about maybe these guys can start to make some more, plays there where they're entering that big game against your guys' rival there in Clemson with a little bit of confidence and, some national recognition that they long deserve. So, overall, I mean, it was definitely the best performance I think we've ever seen from him at South Carolina.
Anthony, let's look ahead to this weekend because it's interesting. As you win, they all get bigger, right? I talked about inflection point, most important game. I actually labeled this game against Mizzou in the preseason as the most important game of this season. Now, I didn't think you'd be coming off a win over Texas A&M, but either way, Anthony, I still really look at it that way now, maybe just for some different reasons in regards to, you don't want to squander momentum. You've won 4 in a row for the first time since 2013. And this is just a trend and a series you need to reverse, right? You've lost 3 in a row to Missouri, and I think all Gamecock fans agree that if you're going to take that next step as a program and really continue to elevate under Shane Beamer, you need to beat the, obviously, Vandy's, but the Kentuckys and the Mizzous of the world, right? If you're going to move up that SEC East hierarchy, you lost 3 straight to the Tigers. The spread came out, Missouri just a 5-point underdog. That has since moved. Missouri now, I think, is either 4.5 or 4, depending on which books you look at. I'll ask you this, because I know PFF, you guys do your own things with the spreads and just what the numbers say. Did Vegas get it right? Are they overvaluing Mizzou? Are they undervaluing the Gamecocks? How do you look at this game from the gambling sense?
Yeah, I saw the initial spread and I didn't know what it was beforehand, but I saw it and I was like, I mean, this kind of feels right a little bit. It kind of seems like, maybe this is a little bit of a trap game in a certain way. Look, Mizzou's tough, right? I mean, offensively, they have some pieces to be excited about long term, but right now, I mean, they're missing at the quarterback position, right? It's still the most important position on the field, and that's why Texas A&M was the Texas A&M we saw on Saturday night. I think you look at Mizzou, that's just pretty much what they're lacking, right? Now, again, a lot of young, talented wide receivers, but they don't have that guy to take advantage of them. But defensively, man, I mean, those guys play with some fire, right? I mean, they're physical. They're probably one of the more physical units I've seen in college football this year. I mean, look what they did to Georgia, right? They made them look normal. And nobody's really done that over the last couple of seasons, other than Bama in the SEC title game. So, I mean, overall, I think there's plenty of reason to believe that this could be closer than I think a lot of people just like. Look, Mizzou's not great, right? They're near the bottom of the SEC. South Carolina's 5-2. They're riding high. It should be an easy game for South Carolina, but I wouldn't overlook them because of that defense. And I think you look at that defense with South Carolina's offense, and it's like, okay, we saw something from 7 this past weekend. We need to see that again and then some, because they're going to be getting after the quarterback, because that front 7, they're not going to slow down, right? And I think with the way they do play, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they do bring consistent pressure, consistently bringing 5 or 6 guys, even mugging the off-ball linebackers in the A gaps, right? Putting a little bit of pressure on them and saying, hey, if you want to, beat us outside the pocket, go ahead. That's what we're gonna make you do, which I think can be dangerous. But I think that's a bet they're willing to make, just given what he's shown on tape over the course of the season, where sometimes he isn't. Sometimes he's taking 10-step dropbacks and when he shouldn't be, right? Just kind of trying to stay contained and stay calm, right? And so I think that's probably the way they're going to play. And that's where we're going to have to see, okay, Spencer, play your game. Do what you did last week a little bit. We need to see that a little bit more this week. So, again, I think there's plenty of reason to not overlook Missouri. Honestly, you look over the next 3 games, it's probably their toughest one. And I saw that clip of you put out, one of the most important games of the season. That's a hell of a call. It feels like every single week we're saying this is the most important game. We're looking at Arkansas, we're looking at Georgia, Kentucky, A&M, like all of those were very important games. But I guess, you got to keep this going, right? Because if you get another win here, I mean, this, again, you're talking about I think a program changing next 3 weeks here, and really career changing for some of these players involved at South Carolina. So again, I think I have no concerns if I'm South Carolina, their defense against Mizzou's offense. I don't have much concern there. It's just, can you escape what that front 7 that Mizzou's going to bring? Because they play physical, they play fast, they play aggressive. You're going to have to overcome that. I think it's going to be difficult to really run the football at a consistent rate against them. You're going to have to kind of break the structure of the offense a little bit. And I think the only thing from an outsider's perspective, being neutral here, I think Mizzou probably should be hoping that, they're still playing offensively the way they did pre-Texas A&M, and it's pretty conservative. And, they're probably just want to see if South Carolina goes, okay, we're going to let the defense win the football game for us, right? And this is going to be a low scoring affair. We're not going to take many risks. I think that probably shouldn't be that way. I don't want to see a lot of quick game there. I don't want to see screens. I kind of want to see some aggressive there. You got to match it, or else they're going to beat you with that. So, I think it's going to be a pretty interesting game. And also, too, I mean, the quick game goes hand in hand with that because you have those quick outlets that they're bringing all of those guys. So I think it's just finding a good balance there, right? Don't be shy when you need to, when you don't have to be, really. So I think it's a pretty good matchup. And when I first saw the spread, I thought about it for a second. I'm like, okay, I can see why it is what it is. It definitely feels like a little bit of a trap. I mean, personally, I'm just not going to touch it. I'm going to enjoy it because I think it could be an exciting game from start to finish.
That's great gambling advice, Anthony. Don't touch it. Just enjoy it, man. Just enjoy it. You can enjoy it a lot more when you don't have to pull for one side or the other in regards to the gambling side of things. But to your point, Anthony, I think you do make a good point. I think that's where the doubt creeps in from Vegas is just, offensively, right? At some point, they feel like, Beamer ball, as good as it's been this season, maybe you're not going to get that special teams touchdown or a block punt or like Kentucky where you get a turnover in the first play of the game and you got a 5-yard field to go, right? You're up 7-0 before you can blink. I will say to your point in this game, and of course, I'm not going to drop my prediction until Friday like I always do, but I think it's a great opportunity for the defense, like you mentioned. Just looking back, last weekend at Mizzou, struggling so mightily against Vandy, one of the worst pass defenses in college football. Brady Cook has thrown 7 interceptions on the season. And, oh, by the way, Anthony, Mizzou is 0-3 on the road this year. And the only team they've beaten, I actually got this stat from Connor O'Gara Saturday Down South, the only team that Mizzou has beaten Power 5 on the road, not named Vanderbilt, South Carolina back in 2020. So they have struggled mightily on the road in his tenure. I'll ask you this, though. How do you see this one playing out? Again, it's a huge opportunity. Gamecocks are favored. You've labeled it a trap game. I think it should be looked at as a bit of a toss-up game. I mean, you have to look at it that way until the Gamecocks get back to, in my opinion, beating Mizzou. Heck, you look at this game last year. I don't exactly remember what the spread was, but it was a game, certainly you were coming off the big win over Florida, right, at home. Everybody was expecting you to win. And you went to Missouri and just kind of the unthinkable happened and you lost that football game. So huge opportunity. You like the matchup in regards to your defense against their offense. I really do think, Anthony, it just all comes down to what can we expect from this Gamecocks offense? We feel like maybe their breakout performance is just around the corner. Is it this weekend, though, against what's a really stout Mizzou defense? How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I mean, too, you got to think Mizzou's kicker because, I mean, they got one of the best kickers in America, Harrison Mevis. He's a unit, but that unit can make some long field goals.
He's
and
really good against Georgia. Really good against Georgia. Yeah.
Absolutely. He had a hiccup before then, but that was a hell of a bounce-back game. I think from a prediction, I'll go South Carolina 20 and then Mizzou 17. I think that's probably the way it's going to play out. I think it's going to be a little low scoring. And again, I think it's going to have to be you're going to have to get a big play offensively because you can't count on those special teams to kind of save you out there. So I think that's probably the way it's going to play. I'm not expecting South Carolina's defense to go out there and just say, "Hey, you're not going to score a single touchdown." I think they're going to do enough, but it just goes back to South Carolina's offense against Mizzou's defense. Ultimately, again, I go back. It's the same argument against Texas A&M. I go to which quarterback am I gonna bank on? Which one am I more comfortable with? And it's 7 in this one, quite easily. So I think that's what's kind of pushed me over there. But it's definitely not going to be easy. Like, I'm not going to be completely surprised if Mizzou somehow finds a way, even with all those road statistics you pulled out. Once you said that, I was like, shit, man, maybe I shouldn't have said all of that, making me, overthink myself a little bit. But that's probably the way I'm going to see it. Going to be a very physical Mizzou defense, but I think South Carolina's offense does just enough to get over top.
And, it's crazy, Anthony. You look at this series, these games, for whatever reason, they feel like they always seem to be close, and it always feels like there's something weird that happens, something wacky. So we'll see if that's the case yet again Saturday. Should be a good one, those. The Gamecocks, hey, look to punch their ticket to bowl eligibility. Who thought we'd be saying that at this point? Punching bowl eligibility before we even get to November sounds pretty good to me, and I think the rest of Gamecock Nation as well. Anthony Treash of Pro Football Focus joins us every Wednesday. Anthony, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. Always a pleasure. We'll do it again next week.
For sure. Appreciate it. Look forward to
it. Sounds good. Appreciate you. Yeah.